Hello. I'm here with Jodi, who has been a dear friend since our kids were little. And I mean, we're talking our elder kids were little, like
Correct.
strollers, pacifiers,
Not toilet trains.
yes, diapers, the whole thing.
Yep.
And we have, let's see, we have navigated life and parenting. Well, let's see, neurodiverse,
Yep.
gender nonconforming,
Mm-hmm.
and struggling
Yep. Pretty much
kiddos.
pretty much everything that a teenager can go through, we've navigated it together.
Correct. And still are.
Because I firmly believe my kids are always going to struggle in some way, shape, or form, particularly in relation to their neurodiversity.
Probably so. Yeah, I would concur. I have to acknowledge that I don't think that me and my family would be where we are today without you and your family.
Well, I think even before we started this fun journey together, we were part of each other's villages dealing with colds and trips to the emergency room in the middle of the night, taking care of rabbits and cats on vacation.
And
Like,
just
so,
navigating life.
so our village, we've always been in the village, but the villages that we are a part of now have shifted.
Yes. They have gotten a little bit more complex.
Tiny little.
Jodi, would you like to share a bit about yourself and your kids?
My name is Jodi. I live in Riverdale. I'm a cisgender, heterosexual identifying woman in a monogamous marriage with a cisgender, heterosexual identifying man. We've been married for almost 21 years. Rich is a lawyer. I'm a reformed HR person. We're both college educated. I have a master's degree. Rich obviously has a law degree. We both are Jewish, though not super religious and more spiritual and cultural than anything else. I'm the oldest of two or four, depending how you count it. And Rich is the youngest of three. Both of us have done a lot of traveling before we met because we met and married when we were in our late 30s. We have two kids.
Don't age us.
Our oldest child, Max, is 19, was assigned male at birth. And when Max was around 11, came out first as non-binary and then as a trans girl.
Similar to Barrett's
Yeah.
journey.
And what we understand from reading and talking to people more learned than we are is that's actually pretty common because of puberty. I didn't read Max as being trans, but if Max had come out as gay, I wouldn't have been surprised.
I think knowing Max, I probably would have said the same. Yeah.
We used to joke that Max was like a 50-year-old gay man in a like 8-year-old's body with Max's interest in Broadway and not
Yeah,
being into sports
absolutely.
and arts
Absolutely.
and things like that. And what was interesting was when Max came out, Max told me first and was really concerned about telling Rich. I was like, "Oh, your father is the least tied up in machismo person. He's not going to care. All he's going to say is, I got to learn more about it. And we love you no matter what. Please go
Yeah.
clean your room." And that was pretty much the
Yeah,
So
basically, yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so essentially, Max told me, and I said, "Look, I don't keep secrets from your father. Let's talk about you and I, and then I'm happy to talk to him."
Mhm.
And that's what happened. So Max went through maybe 6 months, 9 months, maybe a little bit more, where she felt she was non-binary and
Mhm.
used they them pronouns at that point in time. We did a lot of reading and we shared with people in our inner circle
Yep.
and a gender affirming therapist and psychiatrist. So that's the gender piece. And then to this point, at up until that point, we knew Max had ADHD and had some, and would probably have been classified as because she was so smart and so verbal, but really
Mhm.
struggled with social emotional pieces. And then like maybe right before Max turned 13, she said, "No, I'm trans." And we went on. And up and maybe when she's like 12 and a half, we started with puberty blockers. And we were like, great, let's figure this out. We were like, no matter what, we love you. You will always be our kid. And when we did share with our broader circle of family and friends, we sent a letter with a lot of resources. And we essentially said to people, we support our child. We love Max. And if you have a problem with that, that's on you, not on us. And
I
one of
remember that letter clearly.
that, you know, then that
Mhm.
was that. And just given our circle, both family and friends, everybody was supportive, or at least to us, to our faces. There was no conflict.
Doesn't change anything.
No. What do you need, Max? That's really for Emily.
Hi,
Talk,
Max.
negotiate with your father. Okay. I have to wait for her to leave. So I'm going to talk about Leo for a second. Leo's our son, who is now 15, and he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum with what was called PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental delay not otherwise specified, at 2 years, 2 months. We're going back to Max now that Max has left the room. When Max was about 14, she started to really struggle with her emotional regulation. We went to Bellevue one night, didn't stay. Finally said to our therapist, once a week, twice a week is not going to be enough. We need more support. She ended up going to residential treatment the summer of 2020, which was shitty because they did not understand the gender piece, let alone the neurodiversity piece.
Big issues.
Huge issues. She came home and things were okay until they weren't, and then self-harm. We did another neuropsych, and the neuropsychologist said, I think that Max is on the autism spectrum. And we said, you know what? Makes a lot of sense. Some of the rigidity, the routine, the emotional dysregulation, the fact that she has a sibling who is autistic, and Rich has a nephew who's autistic, and we have another nephew who we think is autistic. Upon further testing, both Leo and Max had a genetic mutation that indicates autism. It's called
Really? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
it's called the Shank3 mutation.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yes.
They come
So
up with the weirdest names for these
I know.
genetic mutations. Two
So
is the one I have, but
yeah. So Shank3 for the kids. Max went to residential treatment again. She went to short term in California, which was good, and she went to longer term in Utah.
story.
But because she's a trans girl, there were no options. There's
Yes.
boys, not for trans girls. So that was that. She came home. She's been up and down, and I think Max's biggest barrier to achieving what she wants in her life right now is her continued fight against accepting her neurodiversity. She's always like, I want to be normal. I'm like, what does that mean to you, though? Right now, one of the things we're talking about is she's getting another neuropsych because it's been about 3.5 years, 4 years. And, we're talking about accommodations for college. And she's annoyed and doesn't want to do them because she thinks it's putting her at a disadvantage in some ways and it's singling her out. And I'm like, do you know how many of your peers probably have accommodations? And guess what?
Yeah.
You have them and you don't have to use them, but
Yeah.
you should have, to my point, if she would accept herself and who she is and all of her awesomeness, because she is an awesome kid,
Oh,
like
yeah.
she go further, but she, gets in her own way. So she graduated from high school in 2024. And
Yes.
what you want me to keep going now? Should I pause and talk about Leo a little bit?
I want to focus more on the college piece of it.
Okay, so let's transition to that right now.
Yeah. So she
So
just finished her first year at
first,
Bennington,
yeah.
correct?
So Max is a really good student.
She always has been. I was just going to
Right.
say, she always has been.
Around, and like many neurodivergent kids, give her something she's interested in and she becomes an expert in it. And she
Mhm.
reads everything, listens to, etc. She was always reading, she was always multiple grade levels ahead of whatever grade level she was in. She is actually a really good writer, and she has dysgraphia. So she types or uses speech to text, and sometimes she gets frustrated by that. When she came home from Utah, she went to the Winchendon School in New York City, which has just closed its New York City campus. So,
That's a
and
whole
that was
other
it.
conversation.
So college prep, when we started, she didn't want us involved in the college process. She worked with her college counselor at school and her therapist, who is a queer Black man. He was really attuned to the challenges of finding good settings for LGBTQ kids and who are also neurodiverse. So, like her college counselor, we met with him and we talked about it, and we essentially said Washington, D.C., North could not be Virginia because too purple leaning red,
Mhm.
or California, Oregon, or Washington.
Yep.
And that was kind of really all of the options. At one point, he said to us, I think she should look at University of Iowa. And I'm like,
Nope.
and he's like, why? And I said, she's a trans girl. She cannot go to a red state where there is any chance that she would not be able to access gender affirming care no matter what age she is.
Exactly.
So primarily she applied to schools in Maryland and Massachusetts, New York, and Vermont, all of which are blue states. If you think about it, New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, and I think Vermont. Oh, she also looked at Connecticut too. Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, and New York, maybe Vermont, all have codified in their state constitution protections for gender diverse individuals around
Yep.
housing, education, and many of those states also have protections for healthcare.
They also all have actual shield laws for,
I think that's more recent,
yeah.
but definitely. But
Yeah.
yeah, she, like, even if she'd gotten a full ride to University of Miami, there's no way. It's too dangerous. Florida is one of the worst states, as we know. Like, so my dad, before he passed away, lived in Florida. And he
Yep.
used to say, come to Florida and visit us. And we used to say, she can't go to the bathroom in the airport. It's
Mhm.
not safe.
I spoke with my friend Cheryl and her son, who's trans, earlier today, and it was the same conversation. Maybe they would have been on a campus that was gender affirming.
Correct.
However, they can't ensure their safety once they get off the campus. I mean, bathrooms, healthcare.
So if you think about it, there's the microcosm of the college campus. And what does that look like from a LGBTQ affirming and supportive environment? Because to your point, you could have this microcosm of rainbows and unicorns and glitter. But once they go off campus, God forbid they have some kind of medical emergency or even worse, a mental health issue. What would that care look like? So, we talk about your child who has a
Yes.
uterus. What's going to happen? What
Yep.
would happen in that situation? They're on campus, everything is fine. They're affirmed and supportive. It's a non-issue. They get hit by a car, or God forbid, sexually assaulted, or they find themselves pregnant because whatever birth control they were using didn't work.
No, yeah. We are left with basically the same states and DC you are looking at.
Right.
I
Right.
would say
And
probably even smaller.
right. And I would say I would not look at DC as an option right now. Maybe if the election had swung differently, it would
I
be
would
an
concur.
option. Uh,
Concur. And I don't think Barrett wants to be in DC. He wants to be in New York,
mhm.
Massachusetts, Connecticut.
Yeah. I mean, I think subconsciously there was a piece around if I need to come home, I can be home. And
Yeah,
then when Max decided to go to Bennington, a lot of the conversation was around this can be as near or as far as you want it to be.
which is a
I'm
good
not
point.
I'm not showing up at your dorm unless you call and say you're coming to get me, right? So
SOS. Yeah.
as you're having more of these conversations with Barrett, that's really how we phrased it. Like, Fairfield's in your backyard. That's a great school. And Barrett could go live on campus,
And
you know,
his mother goes there.
right. Ew.
Yeah.
But,
We could have
but like,
lunch together.
but like Marist, but again, like it's as
Yes,
near or
exactly. Exactly. And,
y-
also I think the advantages of being closer to home are that he could also potentially continue with his healthcare provider.
yeah. So our healthcare providers at NYU, it was never an issue. He prescribed what we needed. We made appointments. Telehealth definitely changed the world. Here's the other thing you could bump into. Max is now 19. None of these laws and legislation. Are you frozen? Are we still good?
I'm here.
Nora?
Can you hear me?
All right, you froze your screen. I can hear you. So we're at NYU because Max is over 19. None of these issues are impacting her.
That's fair.
But if she were 18 or 17, we would still be facing these challenges. It's tremendous. When we started looking at schools, because we did go visit a bunch of different schools, it was, what are the questionnaires for roommates? How is that handled? Are the dorms single sex or co-ed? Subtle things like how were pronouns used in introductions or emails? What kind of representation did we see on campus? Was there
That's a good
outreach?
point. Yep.
And that was all important. And then when we got to schools, what did we see and hear directly? I mean, we went to Goucher, and even though Goucher comes from an Episcopalian tradition, there were tons of queer kids, openly trans and queer kids. Not a big deal.
Yeah, actually one of Barrett's
Yeah.
good friends, Sophie,
Yeah.
is there, and they're queer, non-binary.
Yeah. And we also again like so Max applied to like I think Marist is also the Jesuits, maybe.
It
And
is.
the Jesuits are pretty open and accepting.
I was just gonna That's a very good point. The reasons that I really like Fairfield and Fordham is because of that Jesuit. I actually asked one of my professors early on because I'm doing this LGBTQIA plus track. I asked if this was going to be an issue. And she said no, because we're part of these Jesuit institutions committed to social.
Exactly. So we never could have looked at Yeshiva University.
Absolutely
I mean,
not, unfortunately.
Brandeis we could have, but that wasn't the right fit for Max, for who she is as a person. I think Bennington was good for her. There were a lot of queer kids.
Oh, well.
I see that. Do we have to start over then?
Yes, we're going to have to completely start over again.
But now, so Max has decided to leave Bennington because she didn't want to go into debt for the rest of her life. She is transferring to Temple University, Japan. Part of the reason she's going to Japan is because of the political climate in the United States. And
That makes
even
sense.
and even though Japan has, let's put it this way, Max is going to have a harder time getting her ADHD meds in Japan than she will her estrogen. There's always been a queer subculture in Japan. When I lived there 30 years ago, my favorite place to hang out was a drag bar, But Max will go, and they've got an LGBTQ club, and we're gonna have to navigate some different things, like going and hanging out in the hot springs is a social activity. What's that gonna mean for Max? But
Yeah.
otherwise, we're not really concerned about her gender identity in Japan, and we're not concerned about her religious identity in Japan.
Should we try and wrap it up?
What else would you like to know? Did I answer?
Is there anything else that we should be looking for?
I think you have to find kids who are there and ask them, what is their lived experience being at a school? Admissions is always going to tell you one thing, but what was it? If Max was a different kind of kid, maybe she would tell you what it was like being queer at Bennington. Maybe she would tell you. I don't know. I can ask her.